appreciate your song this morning. If you have an opportunity, if there's some way, and I ask the Lord to lay something on your heart, take some daily breads with you, put them around if you get your hair fixed or get your hair cut, or if you shop or buy groceries or a place where you get your nails done, they wouldn't mind, wouldn't consider it to be obtrusive or doing something would be unwanted. Take a daily bread, lay them around where they can be found, picked up. People know if you go to a waiting room, hope you don't have to go to doctors and such, but it's a good place. Leave these around, plant them around. Let's look at Romans chapter 1, Andy. You're on the ball. Romans chapter 1. First verses. Have some new neighbors that moved into the neighborhood, so one of them was here this morning, and perhaps others that we can make a contact with. And thank the Lord for giving us opportunities to have contact with people we haven't met that we don't know. Had a good time Wednesday night, got to see a lot of people, saw some new faces, and some old returnees, and 8 or 10 kids in the children's church this morning. Eight. Liz still with us today. Well, that's Daniel in the lion's den. Good group of kids. All right. I hope you have planned to go out. I hope you're registered to vote. I hope you'll go out and vote on Tuesday. And just vote as the Lord leads you and as He guides you. And I've told the only politicking I've done on Facebook is to let people know that I'm pro-life. I'm like a single issue voter. That just irritates the snot out of a lot of people, Democrats and Republicans. I converse in all the different issues. I'm studying. I try to stay up on them. I try to be a good citizen. But there's really only one issue that I'm really concerned about, and that's about the issue of abortion on demand. So I don't consider that political. That seems to be so moral when you're taking the life of unborn children. That doesn't seem like something about politicians or judges and juries and laws. It just seems like something that is so many in our country have learned to consider that as just like it was some kind of political procedure, and it's not at all. I don't consider it and I'm not trying to infringe upon the lives or the freedoms of any woman or man. My concern is completely and entirely about the baby. That's all that I care about. I don't want anybody to be punished or hurt. And I know, listen, being in the ministry nearly 50 years, I've seen just about every kind of human tragedy you can imagine. So it's not like I'm ignorant and that, preacher, you just don't know what can happen out there to put people in a situation. And I said, no, I've seen just about everything. I've seen abuse and rape and incest. I've seen ugly, horrible, terrible things. I've seen people in desperate situations. And I try to be very gracious. I know the Lord is. I don't have any thoughts of anger, bitterness, or judgmentalism toward people who've had to resort to seeking an abortion as a solution. But it's just, we do it with such nonchalance, and we talk about this many people died in this city or that happened, and then when there are about 2,500 unborn hearts that are stopped every single day. 2,500 every single day. 60 million unborn children have been taken from this world since 1973. Just since 1973. I know that I know all the arguments, and I can never come to a place. I don't think I could ever be put into a place or any kind of position where my solution would be kill the baby. Well, let's kill the baby. Does that sound like that's an answer to something? Sound like that's that's a solution. That's your go-to. That's the best you can come up with. I've told people quite publicly, you might have answers to the economy or jobs or about health care or taxes, and you have all about immigration and everything. You got all these tremendous ideas. But if the number one thing, one of your number one policy that is used more frequently than anything else in your repertoire is kill the baby, then I just really don't want to even talk to you, think about you. And so people get mad at me, but I'm thinking, how in the world can you get mad at me when all I'm doing is rooting for the life of a baby? Well, that's how I don't vote for people. I don't have any confidence in people or candidates or parties. I look for people who are, and here's my thought. There's a lot of people that are going to be in public office or in public service, and they're never going to write a piece of legislation. They're never going to pass a law or be a part of the passage of a law or a statute or any kind. But if I want to know what those people, where they stand on that one issue, and I'm not going to ever vote. I don't care if they, I don't care who they are or what their background is or what kind of a good person they are or think they are or how good a Christian they are. If they're running for an office somewhere, maybe they're an auditor or something, and say, the auditors don't have anything to do with abortion. Well, I'm not going to vote for anybody who believes it's all right, regardless of what they're running for. So that's on you. That's me. That's not just a personal conviction. That's my professional conviction as well. And that I never recommend and endorse a candidate or a party or a stance, but something that has to do with the sanctity of the life that God gives and creates. I make a fuss about that. Give me that offends you. Romans chapter 1, Paul has been saying, well, I'm coming to Rome. And so this is kind of like his introductory letter to the Romans. He says here in the first chapters, I'm headed your way. I'm headed your way. But right now he's in jail. He was sent he was sent to the jail there in Caesarea Maritima. And I've been there where he may have written a place where he may have written the letter to the Romans. When he was supposed to be going to Rome, he instead was collecting an offering to take to the saints at Jerusalem. And when he set foot in Jerusalem, God had him, he really did, God had him arrested. And they tried to keep him there in Jerusalem. That didn't work. There's too many people trying to kill him. You find somebody that seems like everybody in the world hates, there's a pretty good chance that person's on target. At least give him a look. If a lot of people hate him, you find, why do you people hate this man so much? Why do you hate Paul the Apostle so much? Why are you all trying to kill him? There were 40 men, 40 zealots. They promised they'd take a vow. They took an oath. They wasn't going to eat or drink anything until Paul was dead. I used to have a sermon called 4,000 Men. Well, the Romans, you think the Romans are the bad guys. Well, they kind of caught wind of that plot, and they scooped Paul up, and they took him out of Jerusalem altogether. Now, for me and you just kind of scoop somebody up and take them to Birmingham, which is what about would amount to. That's just like taking him to the other side of the world, as far as they didn't. I know people that never gotten out of Ardmore probably their whole life, or Flint, but got him out of harm's way and put him in a prison there in Caesarea. And then they took him. He had appealed to Caesar, and they said, well, we could let you go if you hadn't appealed to Caesar. Paul said, no, I got a ticket to Rome. I need to use it. And so here he is. He sent him a letter. Said, hey, y'all. What was it? You say, tell him Gomer said, hey. I was looking on Facebook last night, and one of my coworkers there at HTPG said every time there's one of the Alabama's football players, he says every time they throw the ball to him, he starts saying Judy, Judy, Judy. I said, you mean it reminds you of Cary Grant? And he began to explain to me, he says, no, that was Homer, that Lindsay, no, not Homer Lindsay, Goober Lindsay, that was his, that's how, and I wrote Cary Grant. That was every time they asked him, Gomer wanted to do his Cary Grant impression, and that was Judy, Judy, Judy. And so he thought I didn't know that, and he said, well, he explained it all to me on Facebook, and then I sent him a note saying, yeah, I know. He thought I didn't get his humor, he just didn't get my humorous response. Well, here, he is saying, tell him, he didn't say, tell Gomer, said, hey, that's what he's doing sometimes on his own show, the Gomer Pyle show. But he's writing to say, God told me to come to Rome, and I'm headed that way. I'm going to come and see you. So we'll see that here. But let's look at a few verses tonight, and we'll go back out into the rain. Paul, a servant of Jesus Christ, called to be an apostle, separated unto God, the gospel of God. The gospel of God. It's a strange phrase, the gospel of God. The good news. Paul, you know, Saul was the name of the first king of Israel. And Paul here is our apostle. He was of the tribe of Benjamin too, we find out. There were 12 tribes, 12 sons of Jacob and Benjamin. So there were there were actually two boys that were related to each other, and that was Joseph and Benjamin. And now they were both kind of their day's favorite, which that never works out. I hope you've tried very hard over your childbearing and child rearing and family loving. Try not to love anybody more than you do the other. I guess sometimes it's hard. But try to be equitable, because it hardly ever works out. We see a lot of times in the Bible that obviously one parent loved one more than the other, and it never did work out well. But the first king, he was named Saul of Tarsus. And so he was named after the first king of Israel. That's a big deal. It's very important. And the name Saul is Hebrew that means great, tall, majestic. It means big. And Paulus, is a Latin word. It's a Latin term. It means little. And so he started calling his name Little. Saying, don't call me. Remember when Naomi, when she's come back into Bethlehem, and she says, Naomi, you're back home. She says, don't call me Naomi anymore. Call me Mara. It means bitter. Naomi means sweet. Don't call me Mara. Don't call me Naomi. You call me Mara. You call me Paul. Call me Paul, a servant of Jesus Christ. You know, this word servant here is actually, we still have servants today, and someone might have a servant, and we still can think of them. There are still people who are in service, still people who serve others, and we think of them maybe as there might be employees, they might be people committed to a particular place of service or ability, but the word that is translated here, servant, it was a word that everybody that Paul spoke to or wrote to would know that he was talking about a slave, which here in the United States, slavery has been outlawed. We don't have slavery. And it is a criticism of many of the Bible that it seems that the Bible doesn't seem to condemn slavery. It doesn't say that slavery is a bad thing. And listen, there's no positive way, either theologically, religiously, politically, there's no way to approach and say there were good things about slavery. You just can't say that. It's a no-win situation. It's not the kind of thing that if you ever said, well, you know, there were some good things about slavery, and try to approach it from that point of view. So many people I know who are here in the South still fighting the Civil War are still trying to justify the secession of the states from the South that started the Civil War. The South was a rebellion. It was a rebellion. It was put down. And you listen, let me tell you something. You hear every once in a while about California is going to secede from the Union, or they're going to split California up, and they're going. That's never going to happen. That is never going to happen. No state in the United States. We might add some states, I don't know, we've got several Commonwealth countries that vote in all of our elections, like Puerto Rico. Did you know that Puerto Ricans vote in our elections, and they have representatives? A lot of people don't even know it. They're like a state. We just haven't granted them statehood. That's a big issue, big debatable issue. But our history has already proven that we're not going to let anybody secede from the Union. Californians are flaky, and I'd say, yeah, let them go. I can see there's so much difference in the way Californians see they have a different worldview than I do, and maybe perhaps than you do. And sometimes I say, well, then, Californians, they're always stirring up trouble. It seems they want to head this way. But we're not going to let anybody. The United States government will burn them down just like they did Georgia. And send Sherman, and they'll start the northern tip-in top of California and just march down through there. And no, it ain't never going to happen. They keep talking about it and people debating it and discussing it. It's never going to happen because we fought a civil war when a few states said that they were going to secede. We said, no, you're not. We'll come down there. We'll send the army in there, and you'll wish you never even thought about it. So that's never going to happen. That's never going to happen under any president. So, no, there's not anything good about slavery. We can say that you can think of the most terrible things that can happen to a human being, dark things and things that are tragedies and things that are awful. And you can say, God brought good out of that. We can say that perhaps. Anything, I mentioned abortion a while ago, a terrible thing, or someone being murdered, or something being stolen, or a house burning down. None of those are good things. We can say that there's no good in any of that. That's not the kind of thing that we could look at and say, a house burning down could be a good thing. No, sometimes I hear people say, well, I had cancer. It was one of the best things that ever happened to me. I think maybe the treatment got a little bit to them. And that's just a way that they kind of chose to look at it and see it and how they chose to deal with it. And I don't criticize them. But I know that if I had cancer, I wouldn't look at it and say, this is really great. I'm glad this happened. But let me tell you what, even God can do wondrous things in the life of someone who has cancer. He can heal someone, and they'll have that testimony. Or, whatever the journey, whatever the tragic steps are that where cancer is a part of their life. There are terrible things, and we can say that even in that, God can bring victory. He can bring victory. And so God can bring light out of darkness. And that is not in any way condoning the suffering or the pain or the hurt. That having been said, there is something about being a bond slave. Paul uses this term about himself. He calls himself a bond slave. And what a bond slave is not just, as I said, it's not just a household servant. It's someone, he's enslaved but with chains. He is bound by chains. It's doulos. And that's a terrible thing for someone to be sold as property, someone to be owned. And our founding fathers of our nation, most of them were slave owners, and they knew that it was wrong. They knew that it was immoral. They understood that. And it is, one might disagree with this, but it's very clear and very plain. The people in Abraham Lincoln's day saw that the founding documents were scripted and sculpted and crafted in such a way that they could lend themselves to eventually doing away with slavery entirely. If someone is partaking of a bad habit or something that is a weakness in their life, and they're trying you can bring it into question if someone who has a drinking habit is trying to tell you to stop drinking or you shouldn't drink. Maybe someone who knows about alcohol is one of the best preachers about not drinking alcohol, but maybe his message is less effective. But there will always, with human beings, we have a tendency in our nature, our human nature, to want to control and to own or to possess, to have authority over people, to seek power. Slavery was a natural result. It doesn't mean that it is something that God designed or that he created. It is a human invention. And yet Paul chooses this term, and he says, I'm not saying that there's something good about being a slave, but there is something, he says, I can see in human servitude the feelings that I want to personally commit myself to with Jesus as my master. No one would ever want to be somebody's slave, though many of the people who first came to the New World in our nation's history were called indentured servants. You pretty much sold yourself to a person so that he would bring you to America. Ever since, let me say this, ever since, kind of codicil to what I said this morning, ever since people began to have the idea, just the idea, long before there were even 13 colonies, long before our country was ever a nation, just the idea of America was something that when people heard it, they wanted it. That's what I want. It is the most wonderful human experiment in all of human history. Our government and its system and our documents are so unique. There's never been anything at all like it. So many people call us a democracy, but we're not a democracy. We're a constitutional representative republic. That's what we are. That's not as easy to say as democracy. Democracy is where everybody has a vote and everybody has a say. It's kind of like mob rule. John Adams said one of the greatest things that he feared and that the founding fathers feared was democracy. They didn't want democracy. They feared democracy. It was a very popular concept for everybody to be able to have a say. Not everybody, that'd be awful. We decided that sometimes what we needed to do is put people in positions of responsibility who would represent us. All of this to say, the Bible took something here that has apparently no redeeming qualities. And yet Paul said, it is something important to me to see myself chained to Jesus Christ. To be compelled. It doesn't offend me, Paul says, to think that he owns me. Or that I'm his possession. Or that he bought me. You see, the Bible teaches us that Jesus didn't buy us. Peter says this, for you were not bought with silver and gold. What does Peter say? But with the precious blood of Jesus. And so it's a completely different kind of ownership, a completely different kind of transaction. We know that there's that father and son symbol that so resonates throughout the New Testament that Jesus taught us to believe in and to accept and to revel in, our Father which art in heaven. But it has always been unclear as to what sons should do, or what daughters, what sons and daughters should be, and how we should behave ourselves, and what are our responsibilities. But it's very, very clear about a servant, a slave. There's no question at all. He's supposed to do what his master says. This is not something that was pressed upon us. It is something that Paul embraced, and I find it attractive as well. It's something that I can say, Paul, I'm with you. I want to be a slave, a servant of the Lord Jesus Christ. That's not offensive to me. And yet, it does not place my seal of approval upon any kind of human servitude that has existed in human history. Slavery is bad. Being a slave of the Lord Jesus Christ is maybe understanding slavery or seeing slavery in its historical context has some relevance in helping me to decide to what lengths shall I obey my Lord. And I think he owns me. And that's not offensive to me at all. And I don't intend, it's not something that I want to foist upon you. It is not something that Paul wants to foist upon you. It is not something that God wants to press upon you. It is something that, if you wish, you can pick it up yourself. It's like taking those chains and saying, okay, put them on. Fasten them around your wrist yourself. Called to be an apostle. Can you see this? I don't know how good your eyes. I get to play with mine. I'm going to quit just a minute anyway. If I get to use this little red dot, I'll be all right. Can you see the difference in those two words right there from the rest of the text? Now, when you're using the King James Version, and still other modern translations, when words are in italics like that, it means the words to be are not translations of Greek words. They're not a part of what Paul said. But the person of the people who was translating this said, that doesn't make any sense. But sometimes it does. Called an apostle. And what he means is, he says, I wasn't just called to be an apostle. When Jesus looks at me, that's what he calls me. I'm his apostle. He called me an apostle. It is something, we have so much respect and so much love for the Apostle Paul that we're really completely out of the argument. He fought all of his life to be recognized as a real apostle. You read in 1 and 2 Corinthians, and there were just a lot of people, just about any time Paul's name came up in a conversation where he was not present, they'd say, well, he's not really an apostle. He's not a real apostle. He's just a tagger on. He just kind of came along. We had the 12 apostles, and he wasn't one of them. And they said, well, Paul's not. And so Paul, in his letters, so often, he argues and he says, no, I'm just as much an apostle as those people are. And when he writes there in the book of Galatians, he says, when I started preaching, when I got saved, he says, I didn't go to Jerusalem and go to the other apostles to get my instructions and to get my words from them. He says, I'm an apostle of God. I got everything I'm telling you, Galatians, I got straight from Jesus. I didn't get it from Peter or James or John or Andrew. Today, we as Southern Baptists do not recognize. Now, there's some Southern Baptists somewhere who do. But in Southern Baptist Convention and Southern Baptist churches and in our church, we don't have anybody in our church that we refer to as an apostle. But I often see in the papers or on the internet or in books that you go to some church or this church, or sometimes they'll introduce someone. Here's the right Apostle John going to come bring our devotion or say prayer for us. He's an apostle. But the gift of apostle was listed in the gift of spiritual gifts that Paul describes. And it's something, I don't think, we never took a vote on it. We never said we don't believe in apostles. It's just something that has happened. We evidently, historically, have never been convinced that there is anybody still alive in our churches today who have the powers and the gifts and the relationship with Jesus that Peter, James, John, Andrew, Simon, Matthew, we don't believe that anybody, Paul, we believe that kind of person came on the scene, they were used of God, and we don't believe. If you feel the call and the leading that God's called you to be an apostle, give it another look. I don't think so. Probably not. We don't. The fact that Southern Baptists don't believe in it really doesn't have any weight at all. It doesn't mean anything. Southern Baptists don't agree with it. I'm just telling you that I think this is a method or an approach that God used to launch the church. But there's not anybody from church to church to church that wherever he goes, he has the authority the apostles had. It didn't matter how important your pastor was, or how many elders you had, or how you had your church set up governmentally. When Paul came to visit your church, he was in charge. He was the man. He was specially gifted and ordained by God. Paul says that one thing, he says, did we not perform the works of an apostle, or didn't we not demonstrate the powers of an apostle in your presence? He said, we did. Paul said, I did things that you saw me do that only apostles can do. We don't believe that anybody like that exists. We don't lay hands on anybody. We don't ordain apostles. We don't call apostles. We don't hire apostles. We don't believe that they were irrelevant, that they were crucial. But they performed a service, a duty. They did something, and then God's plan continued to move ahead. Separated under the gospel of God. This is the word separate is the word horizon, horizo. When you look out and you see the sun setting or rising, you see the horizon there. And they thought of the horizon and then the sun right there. And it was like a dot on the horizon. And it's the word that we sometimes see in the Bible as predestination. And he says, God, he says, it's my destiny. The gospel, the good news of God. That's what we were talking today about bucket lists. Somebody said she was with a group and they were checking off the items on their bucket list, and one of them didn't even know they had a bucket list. I saw a picture on Instagram yesterday, though. It says, this is my bucket. It's full of bacon. That's my bucket list. Paul said, that's my destiny. That's where I'm headed. That's what I'm on that path, on that journey. I've been separated. Under the gospel of God. Paul was a very important person, and he was used mightily of God. But listen, I hope that you will consider looking into all that it means to be the bond slave of Christ Jesus. What does that mean? Spend a lifetime studying that. What would it mean? And then to find out that not only was that you have a purpose, a meaning. The pastor at the Saddleback Baptist Church a number of years ago wrote a book called The Purpose-Driven Life. He sold millions of copies. I believe not so much because he had hit upon such a wonderful topic or that he was such a great writer. I believe that there were just so many millions of people like me and you who were convinced that we need to find out, do I have a purpose? And can that be what drives me? Can that be what propels me? Can that be what makes life worth living for me? To be separated, God says, you've got something to do. You have a purpose. You have meaning. You have value. You have worth. And Paul was declaring, he says, look, God's put me aside. He said, okay, this, and I believe it's not just for apostles. I believe it's for any of us, all of us, to have a sense that whatever we're doing or whatever we are, that we're a part of God using us in ways that we can't even imagine. Be on your toes this week. Look for opportunity. Ask yourself the question, Lord, what do you want me to do? Where can I be Johnny on the spot? Where can I strike? Where am I supposed to be standing? Where's my mark? What's my lines? What am I supposed to say and do? To be a part of something that is so much greater than you and me. So much greater than us.